I'm coming. Hang on. Wait. I'm ready this time, really. Hi. I made it. I'm ready this time. Well, you look nice. Yeah, I like what you're doing with your hair today. Works for you. Have you drank any water today? Did you remember to take your medication? Do you want me to leave, pause for a second, then come back and then re-ask you that question? Okay, geez, just asking. It's nice to have you over again like this. It's been a while. Remember my last terminology lesson? We learned the difference between boundaries, agreements, and rules. Lessons were learned, sock puppets thrown. Good times. I honestly felt really good about that video. I feel like I explained it in an interesting way and mostly covered my bases. A lot of people engaged on that one. I got lots of great feedback. But then I got a little bit of a reality check.
So a boundary might be, I don't date fat chicks.
Oh, right. People suck. Okay, so overall, this is going to be a rather quick video, or at least, quick for me anyway. But ever since I read that comment, I knew I really wanted to talk about this. Not just the comment itself, but everything that surrounds it. Honestly, I'm kind of annoyed at myself. In my first video, I made a point to talk about the way that boundaries, agreements, and rules can be weaponized and used against people, especially by abusers. But I failed to talk about the way that boundaries themselves can sometimes be, well, problematic. By the way, agreements and rules can also be problematic. I'm not just trying to pick on boundaries here. It's just that boundaries themselves tend to be sort of the foundation of the other two. So that's going to be specifically my focus on this video. I won't be repeating everything I said in my previous video about this subject. So if you haven't watched it yet, go here, watch that first, and then come back to this video, and I will expand your eager minds some more. As was discussed in my previous video, boundaries are essentially I statements. They're sort of a self-guiding principle that the speaker can use to help them navigate what they do and do not want to do. Depending on the circumstances, they may have to enforce those with other people. So how can that be problematic? Well, sometimes boundaries are worded in such a way that it's clear that they're actually about bigotries and biases of the speaker themselves. Let's look at the comment that inspired this. I don't date fat chicks. Is that a boundary? Yes, it is. Is it also a really shitty mentality to have and ultimately reveal some fat phobia on the part of the speaker? Also yes. I made a whole video about fat phobia, so I'm not going to rehash all of the reasons why in this video, but what I will say is that fat phobia is very much taught as the norm, certainly in my country. There are a lot of horrible, truly dehumanizing ideas about what fat chicks and other fat people are like. Everything from being lazy to unhygienic to unhealthy and just inherently less attractive than our thinner counterparts. That boundary, therefore, is based on assumptions, fueled and encouraged by a fat-phobic society that rarely, if ever, celebrates fat bodies. Let's look at another problematic example. I don't date Black women. Now, there are a lot of factors that play into the idea of why Black women are less worthy of being dated than white women, most of which, as you can imagine, come from racist stereotypes about what being a Black woman is like. Things like being too loud or aggressive. So having a boundary like this can be the speaker saying that they believe ultimately that all Black women fit into a certain type of behaviors, which, as someone who has, not to brag, but met more than one Black woman in my life, I can tell you is completely ridiculous. If I wasn't trying to talk about something very specific right now, I would maybe take a pause and do a little bit of a deep dive into colorism and racist dating preferences. However, there's other people who have already made much better videos about that subject, so I'll just refer to you to those. Watch this one by Khadija Mbowe, whose name I hope I'm getting right, and if I'm not, I'm really sorry. I also recommend watching this video by FD Signifier, who talked a bit about how colorism affects Black men, which I don't think I've literally ever seen anyone talk about that before, so definitely check those out. Another one of these problematic boundaries is I don't date bisexual men. I actually once got into a bit of a heated argument about that with somebody online. This woman who herself said that she was a bisexual woman said she would happily be willing to date other bisexual women, lesbians, and straight men, but not bisexual men. We never brought up non-binary people, so no idea how she feels about bisexual NBs, but I can guess. And I kept pushing back and trying to get her to really think critically about why in her mind it was okay for women to be bisexual, but not men. And predictably, her response was to just keep saying, well, it's just my personal preference. Watch my Unicorn Hunter video to learn more about why preferences are actually a lot more complicated than most people realize. But the fact is that this woman, along with many others in our society, have internalized this messaging we've gotten that deposits that bisexual men and other sexually fluid mask types are actually less dateable. In the video, Why We Hate Bi Men on Verily Bitchie's channel, she explains that bisexual men are sometimes seen as more prone to disease and sneaky, thanks to, in part, misinformation that came out around the AIDS epidemic. What I'm trying to get you all to notice is that boundaries like this, I won't date fat people, or black women, or bi men, go much deeper than just personal preferences meant to protect the well-being of the speaker. These are statements that, intentionally or not, imply that there is something about an unchoosable aspect of someone's life that makes them worthy of being kept at some distance. Now, some people are going to bristle at that and point out, rightly so, that sometimes who we are is ultimately what affects our boundaries and isn't really about bigotry. For example, a lesbian may have a boundary that she won't date men, which is fair. In cases like that, the sexuality of the speaker, not the other person's identity, is ultimately what makes them incompatible. It's about the speaker's identity, not the other person or some stale stereotyping about who they are. I think it's important to recognize, though, that sometimes people are in denial about their biases and bigotry and will hide behind their identities as some sort of get-out-of-jail-free card. A lesbian who has a boundary that she won't date men is fine. A lesbian who has a boundary against dating trans women because I don't date men, that's something else completely. The term superstraight was created for this reason. It's a way of hiding one's blatant transphobia and misunderstanding of gender and sex behind a label to remove all personal responsibility. I, a man, don't date trans women because I am super straight. And if you argue with me, well, you're just straight phobic. So many problems with this, but let's just focus on two for now. Number one, I know plenty of straight people who are happy to date trans people and do not see it as some kind of challenge to their straight status because they are actually secure in their sexuality. And number two, trans women are not men. They are women. Die angry and throw a tantrum in the comments if you want, but it's a fact. Saying you won't date trans women because you don't date men is a bit like me saying, oh no, I don't eat apples because I don't like oranges. Let me make it clear, you are allowed to have a preference to date cis partners, and you're allowed to date or not date whoever you want. But hiding your bigotry behind a boundary to make your socially acceptable assumptions okay is still pretty shitty. Also, hot take here, but I actually don't think that preferences are meant to act as boundaries. Not at all. I have a preference that all of my partners look like androgynous long-haired vampires or sirens about to lure me to my death. But not everybody who looks like that would be compatible with me or even want to date me back in the first place. I also have a preference that I never have to do my own dishes, but I live alone and my cats don't have thumbs yet. I don't know why I added a yet at the end. These represent the best possible outcomes. My preference is to date Charlize Theron. I would love to date Charlize Theron. Does anyone know how I can meet Charlize Theron?
Let me love you, Charlize.
But if I say I won't date you because my preference is to date Charlize Theron, well, that seems a little silly and limiting, doesn't it? Choosing to never date bi men or black women or trans people or fat people isn't just about personal preferences. These are purposefully ingrained bigotries that were fed into us by a biphobic, transphobic, and racist culture. One that tells us that all black women and bi men and trans people are the same. The thing is though, bi men can't stop being bi any more than a black woman can stop being black or a trans person can stop being trans. And yes, despite the way it gets often discussed in the mainstream, most fat people don't choose to be fat either. I have mostly been focused on dating boundaries for the purpose of this video, but there are many ways that bigoted boundaries and preferences can rear their ugly heads. For example, there are some people who have boundaries that they will not address trans people by their proper name or pronouns because they suck ass. I mean, not that that's what they say, they find other ways to justify it. I once had a woman tell me that she won't indulge, her word, the way that trans people want to be addressed because she didn't want to encourage self-hatred. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that this woman was well-intentioned and truly believed that what she was doing was coming from a good place and not a bigoted angle. However, not addressing someone properly is harmful. And ultimately, she made this boundary based off of a lie, the assumption that all trans people hate themselves. I'd also just like to point out, there are plenty of cis people out there who hate themselves, but I highly doubt that this woman would have argued about whether or not they deserve to be properly addressed with the right name or pronouns. Another example would be that of sometimes therapists refusing to treat certain people who have specific mental illnesses, like borderline personality, for example. Now, is a therapist ultimately allowed to choose who they see or don't see? Yes, of course. However, there is a harmful assumption in there that everyone with borderline personality disorder is experiencing it and having symptoms in the exact same way, which isn't true. To be diagnosed with BPD, you have to present 5 out of the 9 symptoms that are listed in the DSM. Some people have all of them, some of them only have 5. There are literally hundreds of combinations possible. Even if 2 people have the same symptoms, the severity and the way it presents is going to potentially be different between the 2 of them. So to completely dismiss all patients with BPD as not worthy of being seen shows an implicit bias, a way of saying that you believe all of them ultimately present and act exactly the same. Which also really sucks if you have borderline, because if you can't get treated for those symptoms, they might get worse. So yeah, this is ultimately much bigger than just personal preferences. This is about features, not bugs in our society that encourage us to find certain people attractive and others not. Certain people worthy of receiving respect or help, and others of dismissal. This is historic conditioning. Using boundaries in this way perpetuates harmful stereotypes and biases that can and probably will cause harm. There is one major exception to this rule, and that is when someone with a marginalized identity decides to lay down a boundary with someone who does not. For example, some Black people will not date white people. Typically, when Black people choose not to date white people, it's because they just don't want to deal with racism from their partner. Even microaggressions, which, while more benign, can still be really frustrating to deal with. There are some queer people who won't date straight people, and trans folk who won't date cis people, and so on and so forth. There are honestly tons of these reverse biases that we could talk about. The reason why I don't see this as problematic in the same way is it's not being fed by dominant culture. There is nothing in the public consciousness that encourages people to find white people unattractive or undateable. There is no systematic white racism in the media, and there certainly is not a long history of the subjugation and exploitation of white people, the effects of which are being still felt to this day. The same with cis people and straight people. Kat Blaque has discussed a number of times on her channel that she personally does not like to date straight men. One of the reasons that she gives is that she feels that bi, pan, and sexually fluid men tend to be a lot more comfortable and secure in their attraction to her. Kat is trans, for those who don't know. There's a lot less pressure and concern about her partners accepting who she is than there would be if they were straight. This is important because historically, trans women, especially Black and women of color, have had to deal with being murdered at truly horrific rates by mostly straight men. And many states in my country have something called the trans panic defense, which essentially allows murderers to walk scot-free because they can claim that they were scared and suddenly had to murder in the moment because the person they were attracted to may have at one point or another had a penis. I'll link to Kat's video about Superstraights down below, as there's a lot within that video that's actually very relevant to this conversation. While I don't personally have a boundary against dating straight men, I can say that I do have a preference to date bi, pan, and sexually fluid partners whenever possible. This is mostly because as queer people, we share similar experiences, and we might also share similar language. Look, I really like being able to share my bi memes, okay? With a straight partner, I would potentially have to take more time explaining certain aspects of my life, which can sometimes be exhausting and a bit invalidating, especially if you have to essentially justify certain attitudes you have to the straight person, which they might not get. I once had to try and explain bi erasure to a former partner of mine, and it didn't go very well. I want to make it very clear. You do not have to engage or date or whatever with certain groups of people that you do not want to. I don't want to see any ridiculousness down in my comments from people making the claim that I'm telling people that they need to, fuck people they don't want to just to prove their wokeness. Like, don't say it and don't do it either. What I am trying to encourage all of you to do is to get curious and to investigate where some of these preferences and boundaries you have come from. Boundaries are about healthy self-care and protection. They are not meant to be used to justify bigotries or to reinforce stale stereotypes. So if you have those, maybe work on them a bit, and also keep that shit to yourself. Because I promise you, these people that you don't want to engage in or date also don't want to hear it, because they probably have a boundary to not deal with assholes. I know I do. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like I said, it's a very complex issue, and I can totally admit I really only scratched the surface of this, but I really wanted to make the attempt once I saw that comment. So thank you all for indulging me. Also, a bit of an update. If you remember from that last video about boundaries, agreements, and rules, I made a point to talk about this homeless shelter moratorium that was being put into effect. Unfortunately, it did pass, which is really frustrating, and I, for one, never got a satisfactory answer as to why the policies we already have for homeless shelters weren't enough for some reason. I mean, I know the real reason. It's the not in my backyard crowd. There are ways that you can help our homeless and unhoused population here in Maine. For one thing, you can go to the Preble Street Resource website and actually hit the You Can Help button. From there, you can sign up for volunteer efforts, or you can donate. Certainly, they always are in need of donations there. You can also sign up for their advocacy emails, which I have done personally. And what happens is they just send you emails about different ways that you can sort of help. Usually it's something as simple as just emailing city council or things like that. I also left information for the Bangor, Maine homeless shelter down below as well. Yes, I said Bangor. Look, I'm a Mainer, leave me alone. Now, I recognize not everyone watching this is a Mainer. No one's perfect after all. So I did ask a few of my friends about some of the advocacy groups in their area that they enjoy. So those are listed in my description box below. If you don't see your area in the description box, but you do know of a great local organization or something like that, feel free to write in the comments below, or you can also email me, mainlymandy@gmail.com. I will happily update my list. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you are subscribed below, hit that bell so that you are notified when my next video comes out. My Birthmas Day special, which I am very excited for, will come out. Don't want to miss that. It's going to be a good time. You also, by the way, can follow me on Twitter and Instagram @MainelyMandy. I've been very bad at actually shouting those out on here. So feel free to go over there if you want some of my hot polyam takes, or you want to see pictures of my cats, who are very cute. If you enjoyed this video and have the means to, consider supporting me on a monthly basis over on patreon.com/mainlymandy. I actually have a Patreon goal right now that if I reach 50 patrons, I will make a review of the show Polyamory, Married and Dating, which is a show I have feelings about. So if you want to hear about those feelings, consider doing that. Alternatively, if you can't do a monthly donation but can only do just like a one-time, helping me out over on Coffee, Venmo, or PayPal is also truly wonderful, and I definitely thank you. All of that is down below. Thank you all so much, and I will see you all in December for my birthmas, turning 34. Dear God.